to the Kennedy Events Podcast, where we feature top marketing, communications, and future of work leaders and share their biggest takeaways and insights. We love these conversations and hope you will too. Let's get started.
Hi, and welcome to the Kennedy Events Podcast. I'm your host, Paige Buck. Past guests include Cara DeFabio of Economic Security Project, Julie Liu of AvePoint, and Jonathan Stone of Cloudera. And today I am delighted to have Alyssa Glassman, who leads Revenue Enablement for Recharge, a platform that helps the leading direct-to-consumer brands grow and retain a loyal customer base. Alyssa's enablement experience spans across Fintech, working with companies in payments, blockchain, and traditional SaaS sales. Alyssa works remotely from her home in San Francisco, hello from across the bay, and loves to spend time with her family and friends. Today's episode is, of course, brought to you by Kennedy Events. Kennedy Events creates stress-free conferences and events, providing expert management and design for all your corporate event needs, from in-person to hybrid and virtual. And you can learn more about us at kennedyevents.com. Hello, Alyssa. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Thanks. So you're going to have to back up and give us, like, straight from the beginning, what the heck is revenue enablement? What is enablement? For folks who've never heard that framework before.
Yes, absolutely. Happy to dive in there. You may have heard of sales enablement, if not revenue enablement, but today we look at how do our customer-facing teams get the content, tools, and training that they need. And that typically takes the form of three really core buckets. So we have role-based training, product and market training, and tools and process training that we deliver on, and then make sure that our go-to-market facing teams, our sellers, our account managers, our partner managers have the right content to deliver that message.
How in like a mid-sized fast growth company, if they don't already have someone like you and the framework for this in place, who needs to be persuaded that enablement is a smart investment and that this is the direction to go?
This is like the $1 million question. It gets asked a lot. I would say, in my opinion, I think that if you have product market fit, that is the right time to bring in enablement. We are a scaling function. We help you to scale your impact. We are low headcount, high impact. And so once you found that product market fit, that tends to be the right time to bring in someone to handle enablement for you and help to make sure that you have consistency as you grow in your tools and process, as you grow in your messaging, as you potentially create multiple products. And that would be my best piece of advice. But the best enablement orgs definitely have strong support from the leadership teams, typically the revenue leadership teams. And so that's a really important relationship to get down.
How do you sit within the organization? Like do you report up to the head of the chief revenue officer directly?
Yep. So I report into our VP of revenue, and within revenue, we have sales, account management, partnerships, and then my team reporting in. So we sit alongside those teams.
Wow. And then how do you think the best enablement teams like work among and alongside the other teams?
I think that it's really critical to dial in, like, what are the high priority initiatives, especially when it comes to role-based training. We want to be more strategic there. So how do we partner with the leaders of those teams, our sales leaders, our account management leaders, our partnerships leaders, to figure out, like, what is a high priority OKR that you're focused on? For example, with our partnerships team, we've been really working on how do you co-sell more effectively and account map with our partners, especially in the D2C space, direct to consumer. We're seeing that budgets are tightening up. Our partners are receiving, less business or, smaller budgets. And so how do we partner with them to target some of the leading D2C brands for the right type of work and make sure that ladders up? That being said, product and market, we would love to have like a comprehensive strategy around that, but it really just depends on where you're at. I'm very familiar with working in like Series B to Series C companies. Sometimes that product vision extends a year out. Sometimes it's a lot more short term. So I think in a lot of cases that can be more tactical than it can be strategic. But it really just depends on sort of what stage your business is at.
If a company is at a later stage in all of this and they're sort of like just bringing in an enablement now, or they're sort of like reverse engineering for enablement, are there like challenges or frictions internally that you have to overcome?
Yeah, I think that you would probably want to start with an audit. What is the messaging that's going out? Is there consistency? We're not responsible for the source content. That typically comes from our product marketing team and the marketing folks. So they're here to really set our mission, our vision, sort of that like brand guidance. And then we're here to really amplify that message. So the first thing I would look for is like, do we have a brand message? Do we have a brand voice? And then are we using that consistently today to see if we need to like reevaluate, retool? And then I would also look to get some measure of proficiency in those 3 key areas to see where we should be spending our time. Is the product coming out with a lot of new features that we need to train the team up on? Do they have a strong understanding of the marketplace and can speak from a standpoint of thought leadership? So just understanding the organization, and there are naturally ways that organizations communicate. We work in a remote environment, so it's like a particularly interesting one. There's like less water cooler naturally. So like, yes. How do you share information? So it's kind of like doing an analysis to figure out where you have those gaps and then doing a work back plan from there.
Yeah, I love the audit concept because you can just like pause and get everybody, you can all agree.
Yes.
This is where we are now. These are the challenges that we face, and then identify together what the plan is going forward. So then how do you help ensure that sales is like a good partner to the product team?
Yeah, I think that's incredibly important. I think it's creating systems for that information to be delivered. So like, how do we get product the information that they need without product having to sit in every meeting? Gong is like a huge resource for us at my current company. And we really rely on that to be able to aggregate up feedback. So if we have a new product launching, we can create keywords. We can see what % of external calls involve that new product line. And we can get insights into both how we're positioning it, but also the customer sentiment and the reception to a new product introduction. So aggregating that up, I think there's like a really important piece as well with like feature requests to be able to tie that to MRR and for us to communicate it. So it really,
I'm going to unpack it. Help me unpack your acronyms.
Yes.
With MRR.
Monthly recurring revenue.
Ah, of course.
Yes. No, I'm happy to break it down. And I always, coming from the blockchain and crypto space, I actually think it's really important to make sure that you're always like breaking down acronyms. So thank you for
oh my gosh, it doesn't matter. Every industry has their own. We have ours. We have an academic client where every time, academia and acronyms, you're like, stop.
What is that?
Stop you again.
100%. Yes. No, I think that's super important. So I actually think what's really critical is like breaking down those like one-to-one communication lines and starting to create systems that underlie it. And for that, we really depend on our revenue operations team to make sure that our CRM has the right data that we can input and share that with product. We work with product support to make sure that any sort of like requests that are coming in via like a product board or a canny can automatically connect with our product team. So that's where like the process training comes in. It's like, how do we design a system to make sure everyone has access to the right information that they need, and we have a centralized source to make decisions from.
It's fascinating how you're like building it while you're flying it and then continue doing continuous improvement. You mentioned Gong. What are some other tools that you rely on to? Yeah,
Gong is definitely an important one. And I constantly feel traffic controller. I'm like, all right, it's come down the runway. You go this way.
Yes.
So our CRM is really critical. We did a move from HubSpot to Salesforce more recently, and it's a challenge. It's moving into a new CRM. It's sort of like moving into a new neighborhood, you're like, oh, this is different. Like, where's my coffee? Where's my
just connecting all the little dots, like you to realize, like, I have so much discomfort that I don't know where the dry cleaner would be. How often do I take anything to the dry cleaner? Never.
100%. So yeah, having your CRM is really foundational. From an external perspective with messaging, we use outreach, which is really critical for our messaging component and just tracking. We use a tool called HighSpot internally for our content management system. It's really important to have our content like organized in one spot, have a spot that you can go to for trainings, recordings, decks, externally facing material. And then we also use an internal LMS for all of our like courses and things like that to certify our reps. So those are just a few tools that we rely on pretty heavily.
So much data to like organize and structure. Slack. Yeah. So, and be able to like easily access and then connect up all of the dots. It's a really big lift in and of itself.
It is. Yes.
So, and on the event side of things, I'm just curious, like what you think, if it were entirely up to you in like a calendar year or a product development cycle, what's an ideal training and event cycle or calendar look like for you?
And are we talking about like virtual and in person?
Yeah. I'm thinking like number of touch points and around what?
Yeah, that's, I actually just aggregated up these numbers for Q1. So we did, I believe, 18 trainings across role-based trainings. So not everyone would go to all the role-based trainings because they are tailored for an account executive versus an account manager, for example, including product and marketing and tools and process trainings. Last year, I think we did 78 trainings. This quarter was really heavily focused on product for us. And that this past quarter was inclusive of our SKO, so our sales kickoff. So for me, probably about 80 touch points. Like it's pretty significant, with SKO being like the larger event that we produce in the year, whether that's like virtual or in person.
And is there a time in either the product cycle or the fiscal year when an SKO makes the most sense? I feel like it's like always competing with other priorities.
It totally is. We were just having this conversation about like, when is the right time for sales kickoff? Because when you schedule it at the beginning of the year, you tend to, your metrics will lag from the outset of the year. If you're on a fiscal year, like that's not ideal. But do you want to kick off the year strong? We also typically have president's clubs at the beginning of the year. So typically I've seen SKO happen in January or February, but I have also, last year I did it in April because everything got shut down with COVID and we were like, we don't know if we can do an in-person event. And we just like didn't feel strongly enough about our ability to like pull that off without getting it pulled back. And based on our product release schedule, April made more sense for us. So historically we have targeted like first month of the quarter, just so that we can like get reps out, but we're often competing with QBRs, President's Club at the beginning of the year. So it's like, you just kind of have to put your stake in the ground and make sure that the content really delivers. And for us, that means organizing around a major product release, a repackaging effort, making sure that there's something really like topical and meaningful for us to work around.
I wonder if kickoff isn't just a misnomer altogether. It's like a sales rally. It's a rally.
Yes. I know. And now we're like trying to fold in, it's like revenue kickoff and like,
Yes. You're like, meanwhile, it's happening as we speak. It's well, you weren't waiting for this to execute.
100%. Yeah. And we had the opportunity to work together on a virtual sales kickoff in the middle of COVID.
Which was unlike anything else. And I feel like inspired virtual and hybrid and live, and just how much energy was needed.
So much energy. I also just like learned so much. Like I will never go into any event without a run of show now. Thanks to you and Marianne.
Speaking of acronyms. Yep.
Yes. Yes. Those run of shows are critical. And I learned so much about event production and event management through that process, which I don't even know if I would have had that exposure had we not done it in a virtual format first.
Right. No, instead, that is definitely one of the huge advantages of virtual, was that the client side gets a huge education in seeing how everything has to come together. There's been another effect has been, and you've probably experienced this with live or hybrid events as well, that you can like demand more to make a better show because everybody's expectations went way up.
Way up. Yeah. It's funny. I feel like you were saying this earlier too, about how like, you know, we're not like just building like 10-year playbooks. Like what works now, you know, is probably not going to work in a few years from now. And I even think about my own sentiment of like, you know, if I'm getting an invite for like a virtual event now, like I'm probably okay with it. But a year ago, I was so burnt out on virtual events that like, I mean, you couldn't have paid me to get there. And I put them on.
Yes, you're like, I hate it, and I recognize that this is the same experience that my invitees are having. Yep, they have so much resentment.
I do think one of the big things that we learned though is that like recognition really matters. There's a Stanford lecturer who says like Mondays we commit, Fridays we celebrate. In our last sales kickoff, we recognized about 48 individuals across the organization. And across the 6-hour program, we had over 2,000 chat responses, which was mostly people cheering for their team members. And I think that what Sales Kickoff does so well is it really recognizes the individual and the team contributions. And I think that's something to like really remember throughout the year, is just like how much recognition matters, especially in a virtual environment.
Wow. Yeah. Talk more about that, because I know for myself, when I moved to working remotely, and when I started like working for myself, and there wasn't like whether it was the water cooler conversation or just the passing remark, you've just felt like you were living a little more in the vacuum. And I had a business coach that I would say, oh yeah, I closed that sale, and then today I'm working on, and she'd be like, stop, pause. She's like, I know we're on the phone, but like, I don't know, stand up, wave your hands around, do something, like clap, you know, for like self-recognition and a pause. So I know what it looks like, or I try to remind myself what it needs to look like personally, professionally, like how do you create moments for recognition? How do you thread that throughout other things that you're doing?
Yeah, I think it's really important. We created a template at SKO this year that we've been using in like quarterly updates now for the teams, where we share out like promotions, which I think everybody like typically does, but we tack on a leaderboard, we tack on cross-functional recognitions of like team members who really helped our sellers or really helped out our implementations team. We want to make sure that the accomplishments aren't just like the numbers and the team-wide recognition, but you know, it's as simple as like putting someone's face on a slide, making sure we attach we use a tool called some bonusly points behind it to celebrate, because it is really important. And, you know, I find myself, I'm super extroverted. I'm like ENFP. I'm like, put me around the people. And, you know, working from home, sometimes it's like, how do you like get that engagement that you need? And for me, I will say it almost feels like dopamine snacking of like, oh,
dopamine snacking. Yes.
Recognition felt so good. Like, let me keep going. And I also go into a co-working space because I just personally, but I think like creating moments where you do that recognition in group settings is really important, and doing it regularly, whether it's like your team, you know, my team, like we do everything from like mood meters to celebrating success. Like we always have little sort of check-ins for ourselves, but doing it in a group setting as well, and recognizing that work, I think, is really valuable, because our team members are working really hard right now, and we're asking everybody to do a little bit more with a little bit less. It's like, what is going on these days in the industry? And we want to make sure we recognize the work that's going in.
It also sounds like one of the keys that you've like harnessed and like know that you need to unlock with recognition isn't just like, great job, Alyssa. Or like, great job. You got 100 out of 100, but like it's reflecting and amplifying the values, like, you know, specifically you helped in this way. And like, calling on, if cross-functional is really critical to you, as it must be, then demonstrating that like the recognition is coming for supporting that.
Yes, it's absolutely tying it to impact. Like, what impact did you have on the business? What impact did you have on an individual? We also did like a cross-functional team recognition at our last SKO. So we had individuals nominate someone from a separate team in the revenue org. So an account executive could nominate a partner manager could nominate an account manager, and that like cross-functional recognition was just like super powerful, not just like to have leadership recognizing individuals, but also like hearing from a peer level, who's making an impact, who's making my work easier, who is like helping this customer get over the line, who like, you know, made sure that we tackled this challenge that came out of implementations, and really developing a sense of empathy for like what we all do in our day jobs, because you can't see it as immediately.
Yes, I love that. I also love that question, who's making my job easier?
Yeah. I mean, we all care about that.
Yeah. But it's just, I think even if you have a great culture of recognition and appreciation, sometimes you do it, it becomes really easy, but then you don't always pause and articulate the why. Like, I know that she's just awesome. I just love her. She's just great.
Yes.
Let me pull up, or like rewind, back up,
Sure.
back way up. How did you get into this? What's your expertise and background that you ended up in this field?
You know what? I had a very circuitous path. I mean, enablement as a function is newer. I think the number of job recs in enablement has grown like 250% in the last 5 years. I think it's been called a lot of different things over time. But I started out as a seller and an account manager. Actually, my first job was on a help desk working for Bloomberg.
Wow.
Traditional Fintech SaaS company. We also, by the way, sold T1 lines because we like hardwire.
Hey, if you want to talk about tech, that's old. Hey, and Bloomberg, the intersection here. I worked on a trading floor, rolling out the equipment with like one Bloomberg unit. Like,
Yep.
I mean, those Bloomberg terminals.
I was selling terminals. Yep. I was the seller. I actually wanted to transition to tech and had a tougher time doing it. Just kind of like moving my experience over. And I ended up having an opportunity to start a retirement planning business. So I worked with small businesses in the Bay Area to set up 401k plans for their employees and their benefits. I loved doing it. Having my own company was great, but I really felt somewhat resource constrained. And every decision was a trade-off. It's like, do I want to put my money into, resolving this issue, doing more client acquisition? And it was also the time where there was a lot of fee compression. And so I made another pivot. I joined Ripple, which is a cross-border payment solution leveraging blockchain technology and a digital asset called XRP. I know that's a lot of like phrases, but I was there.
No, anybody just bring blockchain in and people are like, sure.
I thought, you know what? And everyone is so sure that I was brought in to build out their executive briefing program, because a lot of leaders within banks, within payment providers, within regulatory bodies really wanted to understand, how does blockchain work and how can it work in our payment systems? So we were setting up executive briefings globally, supporting our event strategy, and hosting them out of our global offices in San Francisco, London, Sao Paulo, Dubai, Singapore. And that was like just an incredible opportunity. But when the pandemic hit, I had this moment of like, oh crap, like what's going to happen to my
job? We do this. Yes.
How do we keep doing this? And at the time I was doing a lot of sales onboarding. And so that was really when I started to build out the enablement function. And I, within like 6 months, I sort of saw the path of like, okay, we're going to be hybrid remote for a while. We need to develop to build trust and gain commitment in a virtual environment, and had a platform to do that with a broader audience. And that's where I ended up building out the enablement function. And I've done this now for going on about 4 years, both at Ripple previously and at Recharge now. So for somebody like looking to get into this space, I think if you have experience working with customers, I think that's incredibly valuable, whether you've been a seller, an account manager, if you have a passion for helping people understand different topics, if you have a passion for understanding how process works, if you like knowing everybody internally, it's a great place to be. I absolutely love what I do.
It also sounds like you must have a really strong hidden talent for like connecting the dots, like both the technological dots to make all of the tools that you bring to bear to make this work, and the ability to express complex ideas. Like, I'm sorry, Alyssa, what the heck is blockchain anyway? Right?
Yeah.
Break that down without making somebody feel like a fool.
Yes.
Yeah. Those are some real skills.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's been a journey. I think it's really just about being curious, and sort of taking an ownership mentality that works really well in this type of function.
Yeah, you talked a little bit about what we're being called on to do in this moment of like, will we or won't we have a recession? What is happening with our economy? Yeah. Only constant is change. What are some of the challenges you foresee in the next 12 to 18 months of wherever we may be going economically, what you're going to have to do to hold steady or continue growing?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think that from a macro perspective, we've seen a lot of layoffs in the industry, and that doesn't mean that work goes away. I think that work is absolutely there. I think that a lot of that work will end up being contracted out. So I do think that there's a really great opportunity for people to build advisory or consulting businesses where they're doing that work externally, especially if they have relationships in. So for my world, that might be, connecting with folks externally from a tools provider or something like that, where maybe I'm working with a company, but we're actually working with a lot of consultants on their behalf. So I could certainly see that being a strong possibility. I think when it comes to e-commerce specifically, we've seen a lot of stock impacts on companies like Allbirds, like Hims. And so how do those companies make sure that they really maintain their, they reduce their acquisition costs, they're increasing the lifetime value of the customer, and subscriptions are a strong way to do that. But how do they make it work for them? I think it's going to be the really critical question. So it's I think holistically, it's all how do we do more with less? I think it's going to happen across the board. And then for somebody who's making decisions setting up an SKO and looking at those trends, it's are we more cautious and we set up a virtual environment to do that and maybe spend a little bit more on the event experience and some surprise and delight options? Or do we just say, hey, it's really important to make sure our message is consistent and that we, that this will be a memorable event and we invest in that really strongly. But I think it's just being really thoughtful about the investments that we make with our time and our resources.
Yeah. So with such a nascent field as the one that you are in, where do you go for, I don't know, everything from, ideas and inspiration to a sounding board or a shoulder to cry on? Do you have peers that you can tap? What do you do?
It is an interesting field. I think I'm really fortunate. Our VP of Revenue, who I report into, came from Qualtrics, that has a really phenomenal enablement program, and I've certainly learned a lot from him and a lot of the individuals that he's worked with. I also have a close friend who was running enablement for App Dynamics and then Cisco. So peers in the industry, I think, are really critical, who really understand what the landscape looks like. But I like to take inspiration from a lot of different places. I love TikTok. I think TikTok is great. I learned so many interesting things from TikTok, and I constantly am thinking about how can my delivery be more effective and what sort of strategies can I take? And I've even had my team do exercises where I say, bring 2 videos, one where it had a strong call to action and you did whatever they suggested that you do, and the other where you had strong recall, like they shared a piece of it and you remembered what it was. And then we dissected what were the elements that made that really successful beyond it just being bite-sized content. So I like to kind of take a multidisciplinary approach.
That's really brilliant. That's really brilliant. Yeah. All right. Final question then, and it's right in line with this, with either a favorite mentor or favorite advice you've ever been given.
That's a good question. I have a good friend, her name's Michelle Alban, and she's sat in my seat. She's done enablement, but she's done just such a great job advocating for women and women in leadership positions. And I remember I had the role in my previous company as leading enablement, but she's like, do you have a seat at the table? And I was like, okay, tell me more about that. She's like, do you own the budget? Who makes the decision? Does the decision stop with you? And she was like, you don't have a seat at the table until you have those 3 things. And that really just resonated with me in terms of making sure that it was not just some honorary title or something like that, but I was really able to sit in a true leadership position.
Wow, I love that. I've had several conversations like this that have focused around women mentoring women and also being unafraid to tap other women for advice and guidance. And I could do a whole podcast series just on that alone.
Let's come back.
And I love it. Please, let's. Well, it's been a joy talking with you, Alyssa. Where can people find you and Recharge?
So I am on LinkedIn. You can look at Alyssa Glassman. I work for Recharge and would definitely love to connect with other folks in the space.
Thanks. Thanks so much for being here today.
Thanks, Paige.
Thanks for listening to the Kennedy Events Podcast. Come back next time and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.